Welcome, folks, for the Gamification Report on game-based learning, gamification, virtual reality, and augmented reality. This is episode 3. Up this week, we read the journals so you don't have to. We're going to have a look today at an update on the literature review for serious games. We're going to look at the efficacy again, because this is the question our colleagues usually ask. Do serious games work? And if so, when and how? We're also going to look at a related topic of achievements in higher education. What actually makes us successful in higher education and training, and how can we link that to game design? Then we're going to look at gamification of environmental education, and then we're going to ask a couple of questions. One, how much immersion is enough? VR versus tablet, who will win in learning? And then finally, augmented reality and authentic learning. Let's get moving on this. We have a great show for you here in our short report. It's going to begin with Elizabeth A. Boyle's team in 2018, an extensive literature review looking at all the outcomes on game-based learning. And randomized control trials tended to show better performance than control trials. This is the work of Sylvester Arnab in the UK, who is going to be visiting us here in Toronto in just a few short weeks, a leader in the area of good design in game performance. Higher scores were seen in many different subjects using game-based learning. English, for example, showed higher self-efficacy, short-term efficiency in health sciences. There was a higher resistance in secondary teachers than primary teachers to game innovation, so when you use games, you're likely to get more results because people think they're just for kids. Tricks are for kids. But of course, it turns out in the literature review, there's all kinds of other data that emerges. The control of selective attention and task splitting is particularly interesting for us. When you're playing a high-speed action game like a driving game or shooting game or something where there's a lot of decisions, it permits what's called faster task swapping, and that means that you're able to move from problem to problem more efficiently. Imagine that you're working in an emergency room and you're trying to play a nurse in a simulation game, and you might have to deal with 10 or 20 patients at a time. That's task swapping, and we want a lot of it. Video games increase the player's ability to take on additional tasks by increasing our attentional capacity. So by using this in a video medium, gamification is going to take us into some great performance elements. We're going to be able to decide which thing is important and what we're going to focus on next. There was also studies in this literature review that had to do with affective outcomes, that is, outcomes and emotions and learning in games. And there was great support seen across the games in flow theory and game-based group play. So what that basically means is that when you're in a group playing a game, you have a higher arousal level, you're more interested, you're more focused, you have better situational awareness and faster performance, compared to a storybook style where I might tell you a problem and then ask you to solve it. When you're in the game, this thing called flow happens. And this is what's called the balance hypothesis, where you have challenge and you have completion. You don't want things to be too hard but not too easy. You want to be right in that sense, and that's what we call flow. We love our flow. What works in training? This is an interesting question because we want to link this back to gamification and game-based learning. This is a wonderful meta-analysis by Scheider and Preckel in 2017. And generally what worked in higher education and post-secondary training was high self-efficacy. And that is where the student feels that they have some control and that they're able to actually do things in the real world. The microstructure and design of courses was important, a goal-directed use of knowledge. So basically a faculty member that really builds their course so that each component connects to knowledge had much better results when you just got up and lectured and hoped that the student with a C picked out the most important facts. What was interesting here, and I want to point it here, is that instructional and communication technology had a weak effect size that did not increase over time. So using more LMSs, using more computers, more iPads, all of that technology really didn't improve the learning. What improved learning more so was social interaction and conceptually demanding tasks. So we don't need a lot of technology to do learning. We need a lot of smart design. Off we go to teacher Apple on the desk. It's funny how the classics hold up. There was another study that we looked at here in gamification, moving out of game-based learning and into the use of games for transition in social and business enterprise. The work of Fallingsdale and Klockner in 2017 developed a game for teaching environmental enjoyment model. And this is the idea of people gaining a positive relationship with the environment. And they developed the game. They had 249 reviewers read it through Steam, which is the big downloading platform for video games. And then they used what was called an in-game sandbox. So you were in a kind of a virtual world that you could build what you wanted to build. Now, this is a very important point that comes out in their research, and we found it to be true in our studies as well. Sandbox game worlds are really effective. There is a huge difference between adding games to your courses and actually basing your learning on game interactions. So a sandbox game is a game world that you can build something. Bad games are so bad that you put them down before you can learn, so you never play the darn things. Whereas immersive game worlds, which we call sandboxes, are a conglomerate of player enjoyment factors, which provides high intrinsic motivation. This indicates that games and learning are not desirable, whereas game-based learning it is. So we can't just use a little Jeopardy quiz game and call that game-based learning. We like to put people in a world where they can do cool stuff in the sandbox and just drive around and build, have fun, till your daddy takes the T-bird away. Now we move on to our VR coverage for this week, and this is a big question our colleagues are asking at UIT. Bill Krapalis and the team are working with us on this one, and this is a great question that was addressed by Olmos Raya and her team in 2017. How much VR is enough? Can you show a picture of a dinosaur to someone and then have them see a dinosaur in VR? And will you learn more from the VR experience, or will you learn just as much by looking at the picture? This is called immersion modulation. And they discovered, of course, that high immersive conditions, where they had a head-mounted display, when compared with direct viewing of content on a tablet, immersion wins over pictures. We have more and more data coming this way. It appears that immersive conditions, when you're in the game itself, influences knowledge retention when delivering educational content. In the short term, participants seem to have better retention with positive emotional induction and high immersion. So yes, Virginia, there is a video game Santa Claus. We have to just go out and find out where it lives and bring it into our classrooms, because immersion is everything. Finally, we finished with some look at augmented reality this week in authentic learning done by a scholar named Su Kai in the University of Beijing, 2017. And what she did here is that she produced an augmented reality-based learning environment, and she produced them across many different disciplines. And she theorizes that students adopted a natural interactive method and enjoy the same experience as they would in real environments, because they got to get rid of the mouse and the keyboard. Mice and keyboard, not so good for you. It isolates and changes your neurophysiologic interaction with the learning. Fascinating? Yes, when you get rid of that and you can actually enter the world. They developed all kinds of probability learning games, augmented reality experiences, convex imaging, magnetic field learning in physics, inquiry-based microparticle studies, iterative presentations in chemistry, and children's vocabulary and language learning. So she looked at a number of different subjects using the augmented reality base. And when we use augmented reality and hyperreality, we see a very, very high level of recall and ability to use the information. That's it for this week. What are our take-home messages? Serious games continue to outperform traditional instruction, except where expert lecture provides mirroring behaviors. Succeeding in higher education is all about good microstructure of course design. Sandbox open world games are now the gold standard in game-based learning that's emerging. And augmented reality provides real learning without a conceptual block. It is direct and it is magical. We will see you next week. We read the literature so you don't have to. Here we are at the Center for Teaching and Learning at Humber College. I'm David Chandross. Have a great week. See you then.